The dandelion drifted through the void like its namesake seed, small and unremarkable among the stars. Inside the cramped cockpit, Alex Prentice stretched her shoulders and took another sip of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The view screen showed what most species would call madness: space folding in on itself, stars appearing in impossible positions, distances that made no geometric sense. To Alex, it looked like a foggy morning back on Tempest Colony where she grew up. She'd been crossing the Null Zone twice a week for 4 years now, and the route had become as familiar as the back of her hand. The instruments on her jury-rigged control panel flickered and jumped, their readings useless in this region of distorted spacetime. Alex ignored them. She'd learned early on that trying to navigate by instruments in here was worse than useless. It was like trying to read a map while someone shook it violently and shone a strobe light in your eyes. Instead, she felt her way through. There was a current here, subtle but distinct, like a river flowing through the chaos. She could sense it the same way she could tell which way was down in zero gravity, or how she knew when someone was standing behind her. It wasn't something she could explain to the handful of other pilots who'd asked about her routes. It just was. Alex made a small adjustment to the controls, guiding the dandelion around what she thought of as an eddy. The sensation was hard to describe. If pressed, she might have said it felt like pressure against her inner ear, or maybe a tug at the base of her skull. Whatever it was, she'd learned to trust it. 18 hours after entering the Null Zone, she emerged on the far side. The instruments immediately stabilized. The view screen showed normal space, with Station Meridian hanging in the distance like a silver wheel. Alex yawned, keyed in her approach vector, and thought about what she'd have for lunch. She had no idea that at that exact moment, 300 light-years away, her routine delivery was about to turn her life upside down. Director Havern Quicks of the Galactic Transit Authority held himself with the rigid posture characteristic of his species. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the office lights as he reviewed the report his junior analyst had flagged. Regalians prided themselves on order, on systems that worked precisely as designed. What he was reading offended every instinct he possessed. The data showed impossible delivery times, packages leaving Station Coriolis and arriving at Station Meridian in under 20 hours. The problem was simple. Those two stations were separated by the Null Zone. The only legal route around it took 3 weeks minimum. No one crossed the Null Zone. No one could cross the Null Zone. Centuries of scientific study had confirmed it as thoroughly impassable. Ships that ventured too far into it lost all navigation, all communication, and typically all crew to the disorienting effects. The longest anyone had survived exposure was 4 hours, and that pilot had been catatonic for a month afterward. Yet here was data showing regular transit straight through it. Hundreds of them. Quicks's mandibles clicked in agitation. His first assumption was fraud. Someone was falsifying records, probably taking the long route and lying about the timeline to impress clients. But the confirmation data was solid. Packages with timestamps, client signatures, even biological samples that would have degraded on a 3-week journey but arrived fresh. He pulled up the ship registration. The Dandelion, a 30-year-old Constellation-class courier vessel. Owner and operator: Alexandra Prentice, human, age 32, licensed for independent cargo transport. Human. That caught his attention. Humans were relatively new to galactic society, only about 80 years since first contact. They were known for being adaptable and somewhat reckless, but this went beyond recklessness into impossibility. Quicks made a decision. He would need expertise. He sent summons to Dr. Yenna Thross at the Galactic Navigation Institute and Captain Voru stealing from military intelligence. If this human had somehow found a way through the Null Zone, the implications were staggering. If she was committing fraud, she needed to be stopped. Either way, he intended to find out. Alex was refueling the Dandelion at Outpost Meridian when her comm unit chimed with an official message. She pulled it up, still holding the fuel line connector, and read the formal summons with growing confusion. Report to GTA Regional Office 7 within 48 hours for questioning regarding transport violations. Transport violations. Alex mentally reviewed her recent jobs. All her licenses were current. She'd paid her docking fees. The dandelion had passed inspection just last month, even if the inspector had looked dubious about some of her improvised repairs. "Hey, Toby," called across the docking bay. A younger human pilot looked up from where he was checking his own ship's landing gear. Tobias Hammond was 25 and had been running courier jobs for about 2 years. He'd bought his ship with money saved from working as a station mechanic and had the kind of enthusiasm about flying that Alex remembered having before it became just a job. "What's up?" Toby jogged over. "You ever get a summons from the GTA?" She showed him the message. He whistled. "That's official." "What you do? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I haven't done anything. Maybe it's just paperwork, you know how they are. Probably forgot to file something in triplicate." Toby grinned. "Or maybe they finally noticed you've been taking the Meridian run." "What about it?" "Come on, Alex, that route's supposedly impossible. You're cutting weeks off the normal transit time. Someone was bound to notice eventually." Alex frowned. She'd never really thought about it that way. To her, the Null Zone route was just the logical way to get from Coriolis to Meridian. When she'd first started running packages 4 years ago, she'd looked at the standard routes and thought they seemed needlessly long. The direct route looked faster, so she'd tried it. The Null Zone was weird, sure, but navigable once you got the feel for it. "You think that's a problem?" she asked. "I think you should probably go find out." Toby clapped her shoulder. "I'm sure it's fine. Worst case, they ask you to file some reports about your route." Alex sighed. "Yeah, probably. Guess I'll head over there tomorrow." She finished refueling and ran through her post-flight checklist, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in her gut. She'd been taking Null Zone routes for years without issue. Surely if there was a problem, someone would have said something before now. The GTA Regional Office 7 was exactly as bureaucratic as Alex expected. Gray walls, uncomfortable seating, and the particular smell that all government buildings seem to share regardless of which species built them. She checked in at the front desk and was immediately escorted past the waiting area to a secure conference room. That was the first sign this wasn't routine paperwork. The second sign was the number of people waiting in the conference room. Alex counted 8 officials of various species, all looking at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to open hostility. At the head of the table sat a Regalian in formal GTA uniform. Next to him was a Corthan woman with the distinctive crystalline patterns of a high-level scientist, and a Helican military officer whose reptilian features were set in stern disapproval. "Ms. Prentice," the Regalian said. His voice came through a translator unit with clipped precision. "I am Director Havern Quicks. Thank you for coming. Please sit." Alex sat, feeling distinctly like she'd been called to the principal's office. "Is there a problem with my licenses?" "Your licenses are in order," Quicks said. "We wish to discuss your flight records, specifically your routes between Station Coriolis and Station Meridian." "Okay," Alex waited. "You claim to make this transit in approximately 18 to 20 hours. "I don't claim it, I do it. That's how long it takes." The Corthan woman leaned forward. Her nameplate read Dr. Yenna Thross. "Ms. Prentice, are you aware that the route you're describing goes directly through the Null Zone?" "Yeah, it's the most direct path." "Why?" The room went very quiet. Dr. Thross and Director Quicks exchanged glances. The Helican officer, Captain Steeling, made a sound like a growl. "Ms. Prentice," Quicks said carefully, "it is scientifically impossible to navigate the Null Zone. No species has ever survived prolonged exposure to its effects. The spatial distortions are overwhelming to all known forms of navigation and biological senses, yet you claim to transit it regularly." Alex blinked. "I mean, it's not that bad once you get used to it." "Not that bad," Dr. Thross repeated slowly. "You're saying you've been inside the Null Zone multiple times, at least twice a week for the past 4 years. Sometimes more if I pick up several packages going the same direction." Alex was genuinely confused now. "Is this not allowed?" There weren't any warning buoys or restricted zone markers. "There are no markers because no one believed passage was possible," Quick said. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. "Ms. Prentice, I must ask directly, are you using some form of experimental navigation technology, undisclosed AI assistance? Any equipment not listed in your ship's registration? No. Just standard navigation gear, and half of it doesn't work right anyway. I mostly fly manual in the zone. Manual, Captain Steeling said flatly. You navigate the null zone manually, by sight. And feel, sort of. It's hard to explain. Dr. Thross was entering notes on her datapad with quick, excited movements. This is extraordinary. If you're telling the truth, you may have a perceptual or cognitive ability that no other documented species possesses. Or she's lying, Steeling said. This could be an elaborate fraud. False timestamps, confederates at both stations, packages that never actually make the journey she claims. Alex felt her temper flare. I'm not lying, I can prove it. How? Quicks asked. Come with me on my next run. I've got a delivery scheduled for day after tomorrow, Coriolis to Meridian. You can watch me do it. The room erupted in conversation. Several officials immediately objected, citing safety concerns and protocol violations, but Dr. Thross was nodding enthusiastically. Yes, she said. Yes, that's exactly what we need to do, direct observation. Absolutely not, Steeling growled. We're not risking personnel on some human's wild claim. Then I volunteer, Thross said. This is too important. If there's even a possibility she's telling the truth, we have to investigate. Quicks raised one clawed hand for silence. His compound eyes fixed on Alex. You understand that if this is some form of deception, the penalties will be severe. I understand I'm telling the truth, Alex said, and I'm getting a little tired of being called a liar. Quicks was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Very well. Dr. Thross will accompany you on your scheduled run. I will also send Captain Steeling as a military observer. We will install monitoring equipment on your vessel to record all data. If you truly can navigate the null zone, this will be documented. If you cannot, well, his mandibles clicked. We will address that situation as it arises. 2 days later, Dr. Yenna Thross stood in the docking bay, staring at the dandelion with barely concealed dismay. The ship was small, old, and looked like it had been repaired with whatever spare parts happened to be available. Panels didn't quite match. The hull plating was 3 different shades of gray. One of the landing struts had clearly been replaced with a component from an entirely different ship class. This is your vessel? Steeling asked. The Helican officer had arrived in full tactical gear, as if expecting combat. She's more reliable than she looks, Alex said, running through her pre-flight checklist. I've had her for 6 years. Never let me down. A crew of GTA technicians was installing monitoring equipment throughout the ship, far more sophisticated instruments than Alex normally used. She watched them work with mild concern. That's not going to interfere with my controls, is it? It shouldn't, the lead technician assured her. We're just observing, recording environmental data, spatial distortions, your ship's performance metrics. Whatever you need. Alex finished her external inspection and climbed aboard. We launch in 30 minutes. Hope you both use the bathroom. It's an 18-hour flight. Dr. Thross settled into the co-pilot seat with her personal datapad already recording. Steeling had to hunch in the cramped passenger space behind the cockpit. His combat helmet scraped the ceiling. The dandelion lifted off smoothly enough. Alex guided them out of the station's traffic pattern and set course for the null zone boundary. She'd loaded a cargo of medical supplies bound for Meridian standard stuff that needed to arrive fresh. The client was paying premium rates for fast delivery. How long until we reach the zone? Thross asked. About 40 minutes at current speed. Alex settled back in her seat. Fair warning, some equipment gets weird in there. Your personal devices might glitch. We're aware of the theoretical effects, Steeling said. We've prepared accordingly. Alex shrugged. They'd see. As they approached the boundary, Thross's instruments began to show the expected anomalies. Space itself seemed to ripple on the sensors. The monitoring equipment started recording frantically. We're now entering the outer region, Thross narrated into her recorder. Spatial distortion increasing, electromagnetic interference rising, standard navigation sensors showing degradation. Alex watched her own instruments start to flicker. The old navigation computer tried to plot a course, failed, recalibrated, and failed again. She switched it off. Yeah, that's normal. They crossed into the null zone proper. The effect on Thross and Steeling was immediate. Thross gasped as her datapad screen shattered into static. Steeling's heads-up display inside his helmet flickered and died. He yanked the helmet off with a snarl. "What happened to your equipment?" Alex asked, concerned. "Everything just stopped working," Thross said. She sounded breathless. "Even my translator is cutting in and out." More concerning was the look on their faces. Both of them had gone pale, well, as pale as their respective species could. Thross gripped her seat with white knuckles. Steeling's nictitating membranes flickered rapidly across his eyes. "Are you okay?" Alex asked. "I feel," Thross said slowly, "extremely disoriented, like every sense of direction just vanished." "Yeah, it can be rough if you're not used to it," Alex said sympathetically. "Try closing your eyes if it helps, or focus on a fixed point inside the cabin." She turned her attention back to flying. The currents were clear today, strong and steady. She could feel them flowing around the ship, guiding her path. There was a tricky eddy about 6 hours in that she'd need to watch for, but otherwise it should be smooth sailing. "What currents?" Thross asked. She'd heard Alex muttering. "The flows, the paths through the distortions. Can't you feel them?" "I don't feel anything except nauseous," Thross admitted. Alex tried to explain. "It's like, okay, you know how you can tell which way is down even with your eyes closed, or how you know when you're moving even in 0G. It's a sense like that. The currents are there, you just have to pay attention to them." She made a small adjustment to the controls, following a bend in the current. To her, it was obvious. The path was right there, clear as day. Well, clear as a foggy day, but still. "I'm not detecting any currents," Thross said, checking her few remaining functional instruments. "Gravitational readings are chaotic. Spatial geometry is non-Euclidean. There's no consistent frame of reference." "Yeah, the instruments can't see it. You have to feel it." Steeling tried to look at the view screen and immediately turned away, his scales paling to gray. "The visual data makes no sense. Space is folding in ways that shouldn't be possible." "Don't look at it directly," Alex advised. "Use your peripheral vision. It's easier." Hours passed. Alex remained calm and focused, occasionally eating a protein bar or sipping water. She made constant small adjustments to their course, following the invisible currents with practiced ease. She'd long ago stopped thinking about it consciously. Her hands moved on the controls with the automatic precision of deep muscle memory. Thross and Steeling struggled. The disorientation was profound and exhausting. Both of them felt a deep, primal wrongness about being in this place. Every instinct screamed that they were lost, that they were going to die here. The fact that Alex seemed completely unbothered was almost more disturbing than the null zone itself. "How can you stand this?" Steeling asked after the 10th hour. He'd given up trying to monitor anything and was simply enduring. "Stand what?" Alex glanced back at him. "Oh, the zone. I don't know. Doesn't really bother me. It's kind of peaceful, actually. No traffic, no calm chatter, just me and the ship." "Peaceful," Thross repeated weakly. "This is the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and you find it peaceful." Alex considered that. I guess it's all perspective." Around hour 14, they hit the eddy Alex had been expecting. She felt it coming, a twist in the current like hitting a whirlpool. She adjusted course smoothly, riding along the edge of it rather than fighting through. "What was that?" Steeling demanded. His combat instincts had kicked in at the sudden course change. "Just an eddy. They happen sometimes. You go with them, not against them." Alex guided the ship through the turbulence with easy confidence. "There's a big one about 3 hours from the exit. That's usually the roughest part." "There's something worse than this?" Thross asked. "It's not worse, just more active. Hang on, I'll get us through." When they finally emerged from the null zone into normal space, the relief on Thross and Steeling's faces was profound. Instruments flickered back to life. The view screen showed regular, sensible space where stars stayed where they belonged. Both of them looked physically drained. "Well," Alex said cheerfully, "that wasn't so bad. We made good time actually. 17 hours 40 minutes. She keyed in the approach to station Meridian. "I'll have us docked in 20 minutes, and then I really need to stretch my legs." Thross and Steeling said nothing. They were still processing the fact that they just crossed the null zone and survived. More than survived, they'd done it in less than a day, guided by a human who treated the journey like a commute. The debriefing back at GTA headquarters was intense. Quix had assembled an even larger group of officials, scientists, and military advisors. Thross and Steeling gave their reports, both confirming that yes, Alex Prentice had indeed navigated straight through the null zone. She's not using any special technology, Thross reported. Her crystalline patterns were still showing stress colors, but her eyes shone with scientific fervor. The ship is basic, even crude. Most of her instruments don't function in the zone. She's doing it with her own senses. Impossible, someone objected. I watched her do it, Steeling said flatly. The military officer looked shaken, an unusual state for a Helican. For 18 hours she flew through conditions that should have killed us all. She was calm the entire time, even described it as peaceful. What we're seeing, Thross continued, pulling up data on the main display, is a fundamental difference in sensory processing. Human neurology appears capable of perceiving and interpreting the spatial distortions in the null zone as navigable space. Where our species experience overwhelming chaos, humans detect patterns. One human, Quix corrected. We have a sample size of one. Actually, Thross said, I'd like to test that assumption. If this is a species-wide trait, other humans should be able to develop similar abilities. The implications were already spreading through the room. An economic analyst stood up. Director, if humans can reliably navigate the null zone, we're looking at a complete restructuring of interstellar trade. The zone currently forces a 3-week detour between two major trade sectors. A direct route would save tremendous time and resources. A military strategist added, the null zone has been an impassable barrier for centuries. Our entire defensive strategy for the rim territories assumes that barrier. If it's no longer impassable, we need to completely reconsider our security posture. What about colonization? Someone else asked. There are habitable systems on the far side of the null zone that we've considered unreachable if humans can navigate to them. The conversation spiraled into dozens of scenarios. Quix finally called for order. We're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we need to verify this is a repeatable phenomenon. Dr. Thross, I want a full research program established. Test other humans. Try to quantify whatever ability they're demonstrating. We need to understand this before we make policy decisions. Agreed, Thross said. I'll need volunteers, and I'll need Ms. Prentice's cooperation. She'll cooperate, Quix said. I'll make sure of it. But Alex, it turned out, was less enthusiastic about cooperating than Quix had assumed. When he contacted her with a request to participate in a research program, her response was blunt. I'm a courier, not a research subject. Ms. Prentice, this is a matter of significant galactic importance. That's great, I've got packages to deliver. Quix felt his mandibles click in frustration. You would be compensated for your time. I'm already compensated. My clients pay me to deliver their cargo, which I can't do if I'm sitting in a lab somewhere. In the end, they compromised. Alex would make herself available for non-invasive testing and would allow other humans to fly with her to observe her techniques, but she wouldn't give up her courier work. Quix agreed, mainly because he didn't have any legal grounds to force her cooperation. Word was spreading fast. Within a week, every major news service in the galaxy was running stories about the human who could navigate the impossible. Alex's comm unit was flooded with messages. Job offers, interview requests, marriage proposals from species she'd never heard of, and a truly staggering number of messages from other humans asking how she did it. Toby showed up at her ship with a huge grin. You're famous. There are betting pools about whether other humans can do it. I might have put money on yes. Don't suppose you'd like to help me figure that out? Alex asked. Dr. Thross wants to test more humans, and I could use someone I actually trust flying with me. Are you kidding? Absolutely. Over the next month, Dr. Thross conducted extensive testing. She brought in 40 human volunteers, ranging from experienced pilots to people who'd never flown a ship in their lives. The results were remarkable. Every single human showed at least some ability to perceive patterns in the null zone environment. About 70% reported being able to sense the currents Alex described, though with varying degrees of clarity. The key seemed to be practice and confidence. Humans who flew with Alex and learned to trust their instincts improved rapidly. Toby made his first solo crossing on his 5th attempt, emerging from the null zone with a whoop of triumph. Two other human couriers managed it shortly after. One older woman, a former colony administrator with no piloting experience, described the null zone navigation as rather like orienteering in thick fog. You use different references than normal, but they're there. Dr. Thross published her findings in the Galactic Journal of Xenobiology. Her paper, Adaptive Spatial Processing in Human Neurology, Implications for Navigation in Non-Standard Geometries, became the most downloaded scientific article in history. Her core thesis was elegant. Human brains had evolved to be extremely good at pattern recognition and spatial mapping in complex, changing environments. This was an adaptation from Earth, where early humans survived by tracking animals, reading landscapes, and navigating without instruments. That same neural architecture, by pure chance, happened to be well suited to interpreting the chaos of the null zone. Not everyone was happy about these developments. The Meridian Commerce Guild had built their empire on controlling the trade routes that went around the null zone. They owned the stations, the refueling depots, the cargo warehouses. A route straight through the zone would devastate their business model. The MCG couldn't attack Alex directly. She was too public now, too visible. Instead, they launched a propaganda campaign. Human navigation was unreliable, dangerous. Ships would go missing in the zone and no one would even know. There should be strict regulations, safety requirements, mandatory oversight. The subtext was clear. Make human navigation so expensive and bureaucratically difficult that it wouldn't be commercially viable. Meanwhile, various other factions were making offers. A military contractor offered Alex an exclusive contract worth more money than she'd make in 10 lifetimes of courier work. A megacorporation wanted to buy the dandelion for their museum and pay her to train their pilots. A research consortium offered her a position as a senior fellow, no actual research required, just having her name attached. Alex turned them all down. She just wanted to deliver packages. But the pressure kept mounting. More humans were entering the courier business, undercutting the established companies. The MCG's profits were plummeting. They needed to act. The crisis came to a head when the MCG successfully lobbied the GTA for an emergency session. Their proposal was presented as a safety measure. Declare the null zone a regulated space requiring special permits and oversight. In practice, it would give the MCG and their political allies control over who could cross the zone. Alex received a summons to testify. This time, it wasn't to a small conference room but to the GTA's Grand Council chamber. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of species would vote on the proposal. She'd have a chance to speak, but so would the MCG's lawyers and lobbyists. "You don't have to do this," Toby told her the night before. "You could just keep flying. Let someone else fight the political battles." "If I do that, they'll regulate us out of existence," Alex said. "Then I can't keep flying anyway." She'd never wanted to be a public figure. Standing in front of the council with cameras from every major news service pointed at her was her personal nightmare. But she told her story. How she discovered the route by accident, trying to find a faster way to make her deliveries. How it had seemed obvious to her, like finding a shortcut through a city you knew well. How the null zone wasn't a monster or a mystery, just space that looked different if you knew how to see it. The MCG's representatives argued for safety, for oversight, for the proven systems that had kept galactic commerce running for centuries. They made Alex sound reckless, dangerous, a maverick who didn't respect the rules. Then Dr. Thross testified. She presented her research calmly and methodically. Human navigation wasn't magic or technology. It was biology. Humans perceived the null zone differently than other species, the same way some species could see ultraviolet light or hear subsonic frequencies. You couldn't regulate that away. You could require training, safety standards, ship inspections, all reasonable measures. But you couldn't ban a species from using their own senses. Director Quicks, to Alex's surprise, also spoke in support. "Law must be grounded in what is possible and what is just," he said in his precise way. "Ms. Prentice has broken no laws. She has operated in good faith, paid her fees, maintained her licenses. She discovered a capability we did not know existed. That is not a crime, that is progress." The vote was scheduled for the next day. Alex spent the evening in a station bar with Toby and some of the other human couriers who'd learned the Null Zone routes. They were nervous but trying not to show it. "Even if it goes against us," Toby said, "they can't actually stop us, we'll just keep flying." "They can revoke licenses," Alex pointed out. "Impound ships, make it illegal. Then we fly without licenses, become smugglers." Toby grinned, but there was an edge to it. "Humans are good at that too." Alex hoped it wouldn't come to that. The vote came down to a narrow margin. The MCG's proposal failed, 342 to 318. But the GTA did implement new regulations. Pilots claiming null zone capability had to demonstrate competency in a supervised test run. Ships needed minimum safety equipment. There were restrictions on passenger transport until more data was gathered. All reasonable requirements, Alex had to admit. The MCG was furious, but there was nothing they could do. The null zone was open to human navigation. Their monopoly was broken. 6 months later, Alex was back to her normal routine. Well, mostly normal. She was busier than ever and she could charge premium rates. She'd hired Toby as a partner. He was running his own routes now, getting good at it. Occasionally, they'd sync up and fly together, enjoying the quiet of the zone and the easy companionship. The dandelion was better maintained now. Alex could afford proper parts instead of improvised repairs. She'd even upgraded some of the living space, though the ship still looked like a patchwork to anyone who didn't know her history. Other humans had started a Null Zone Navigation Academy on Station Coriolis. It was becoming a popular career path for human pilots. Some of the alien species were still uncomfortable with the whole thing, but most had accepted it as the new normal. The galaxy was adapting. Alex docked at Station Meridian after a routine run, delivered her packages, and headed to her favorite coffee shop. The owner, a Felician named Zillanth who'd been one of her first regular clients, greeted her with a purring chuckle. "The famous navigator returns," Zillanth said, preparing Alex's usual order without being asked. "I'm not famous, I just have a job. You change the galaxy. I just found a shortcut." Someone in the coffee shop recognized her and asked for an autograph. Alex signed their datapad with mild embarrassment, then escaped back to her ship with her coffee. As she walked through the docking bay, she passed a group of young aliens, 3 species she didn't recognize, clustered around a star chart. They were talking excitedly about the new human routes, the possibilities of exploration beyond the null zone, systems that were suddenly reachable. Alex smiled and kept walking. She hadn't meant to change anything. She'd just been trying to deliver packages efficiently. Somehow that had been enough to shift the foundations of galactic civilization. The dandelion waited in her berth, ready for the next job. Alex climbed aboard, settled into the pilot's seat, and pulled up her schedule. 3 deliveries, all null zone routes. She finished her coffee, ran through her pre-flight checks, and requested departure clearance. As the ship lifted off, Alex felt the familiar anticipation. In a few hours, she'd be back in the zone. Back in the strange, peaceful chaos that only humans could navigate. Back in the impossible place that had become her highway. The comm unit chimed. A new job offer, this one from a scientific expedition wanting to reach a system on the far side of the zone. They were offering very good money. Alex considered it, then accepted. Why not? It was just another delivery run. She set her course and accelerated toward the null zone boundary. The instruments flickered as she approached. Alex switched them off and opened her senses to the currents. There she could feel them already, the familiar flows and patterns. "All right," she muttered to herself, her hands steady on the controls. "Let's go to work." The dandelion crossed into the null zone, and Alex Prentice, unremarkable courier pilot, guided her small ship through impossible space with the casual confidence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Behind her, the galaxy continued its noisy debates about humans and navigation and the future of interstellar commerce. Ahead of her, the null zone stretched out in all its chaotic glory. Alex smiled and followed the currents home.